Hi guys, welcome back to Elizabeth Ann Reads. I'm Anne, and today we're doing my November wrap-up. I have just not had time lately to film. I've not been home. I don't know if you can tell, I'm not at home right now. I'm house sitting, and I just haven't been home enough to get any filming done, and I'm just falling way behind on stuff. So we're just going to go ahead and do this super casually right now, right here, so I can get this video up. So yeah, I don't have any of the books with me that I read in November, so I'll put pictures here. But yeah, let's get into it. I read 11 books in the month of November, which I'm pretty happy with. Starting off with A Tale Dark and Grim by Adam Gidwitz. This is a middle grade fairy tale retelling, kind of follows Hansel and Gretel, and then they find their way kind of into a bunch of different fairy tales. So it's kind of a mashup of a bunch of different things, but primarily following Hansel and Gretel. And this book is called A Tale Dark and Grim, and it was very dark. I didn't particularly like it. I think I ended up giving it 2 stars. It was just dark in a not good way. It seemed dark for no reason, and I think he was trying to put humor into the story, but it wasn't working. Like, it was like Lemony Snicket, like a series of unfortunate events, but done poorly, in my opinion. So I didn't like it. I know it's the first in a series. I will not be continuing on with the series, but I did read it, so there you go. The next book I read was actually a novella, and it was Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Frederick Bachman. This is following an elderly man who is dying. He has Alzheimer's or some form of something that affects the memory. And it's just a very sweet tale of him, kind of this mix of him remembering things versus people talking to him, you know, at where he is now in life. So there's conversations with his son and his grandson and his wife, and it's very sweet. It's very bittersweet. It's very sad. But as with everything Frederick Bachman does, it was very, very well written. After that, I read Wayward and The Last Town by Blake Crouch. These are books 2 and 3 in the Wayward Pines trilogy. And I really enjoyed Pines, which is the first book, and I read that in October. I liked Wayward and The Last Town less than I liked Pines. They're still fine. They're still like an average, kind of a 3-star read for me, but it felt like after the big climax of the first book and the revelation of the twist, it felt like there wasn't a lot more to do after that. So these books, while there was plot to it, it didn't feel like there was enough plot. I felt like the 3 books could have been condensed into 1, and it would have been really good, but it just felt like there wasn't enough to continue on with the trilogy. And yeah, it just felt it kind of fizzled out at the end. After that, I read Keeper of the Lost Cities Legacy by Shannon Messenger. This is the brand new book in the Keeper of the Lost Cities series. I believe it's book 8. And this is a middle grade fantasy series following Sophie and the world of the elves. And yeah, I thought this book was really good. The last couple books in the series have not been as good, so I was a little tentative going into this one, but I thought this one really picked up. It felt like we were getting answers to questions that had kind of been there since the beginning of the series. It felt like she's starting to tie up things to get to the end of the series, whereas the last, at least especially the last book, felt very much just like filler. So yeah, I thought this was a great book. I gave it 4 stars, I believe. And I thought it was a good build-up to an ending in the next book or 2. I don't know how many books there's supposed to be, but we're getting there. Next, I read One Light Still Shines by an author I can't remember the name of, but I'll put it here. This is a nonfiction, and it tells the story of the shooting at the Amish school back in 2006, I believe. And it's actually written by the wife of the shooter. So it's less about the event itself and more about kind of the aftermath and what happened in the community. And it was really interesting. I really liked kind of that aspect of it. It talks about the situation, but it doesn't focus on the awful things that happened or the drama. It focuses on the people that had to kind of recover their lives after, and it talks a lot about forgiveness and just the community between this woman and her family, who, you know, she's widowed now. Her children are orphans. And then you have an Amish community, which is absolutely devastated by what's happened. But just the way they come together and the forgiveness that's there and just their stories of just healing and redemption. And I thought it was a really good story. Again, I thought the beginning was stronger than the ending. That seems to kind of be a theme this month. But in general, I thought it was a really good, really well-balanced take on that situation. Next, I read just a short little children's book. It's a beginning chapter book called Sophie Mouse, A New Friend. This is the first in a series, and I read it purely because I was hunting out Christmas gift ideas for my nieces. And this book was really cute. It follows Sophie Mouse and her friend Hattie. I think it's Hattie, who's a frog. And they go to school one day, and there's a new student, Owen, who is a snake. And obviously, Sophie's pretty afraid of Owen. She's never met a snake before. So it's just a very sweet story about friendship, about, not judging people on sight, on, being welcoming and loving to people. It was very cute. I liked it. After that, I read Before and After by Lisa Wingate. And this is the nonfiction follow-up to her book Before We Were Yours. So this follows the true stories of some of the orphans that came through the Tennessee Children's Home Society. And this, again, was a really interesting read. It goes into, it more kind of follows the story of what happened after Before We Were Yours was published, when people started contacting her and wanting to do a reunion, and just the way these different people came together and their stories told kind of through that experience after the book. So it wasn't so much like a detailed history as more just these people's reflections on finding each other and kind of coming together. But definitely worth a read. If you've read Before We Were Yours, I would highly recommend picking this one up just to get kind of a fuller view of the story. After that, I read The Toll by Neil Shusterman, which is book 3 in the Ark of the Scythe trilogy. It just came out in November. And it was pretty good. I think it started really slowly, for me at least. It took kind of a long time to feel like I was getting anywhere. And it seemed to be a little bit scattered. Like, you seem to be kind of following different people and different events. And I was just having a hard time kind of getting the continuity of the story overall. And I was a little annoyed that the main characters that we followed since the beginning are just kind of appear in this book just briefly. They're pretty much just token players in this book. And so in some ways it felt like it wasn't a good tie-up to the series. Like, the plot tied up, but I didn't feel like the characters tied up very well, I guess, for me. So I didn't dislike it. It was pretty average for me. It was 3.5 probably. Again, the storyline I thought tied up well. I just didn't find myself drawn into it like I had been into the first one especially. So I'm probably the only one that feels this way. But there you go. I liked it. Didn't love it. Then I read The 101 Dalmatians by Dodie Smith, which I've never read before. I've, of course, seen the movie. But I liked the book. I thought it was very sweet. I enjoyed getting kind of the bigger story that you don't get in the movie. One thing I will say is it's a very dated book. And it was published in the 50s, I believe. You just kind of have to look past some of the different stereotypes because it becomes pretty obvious very early on that all the male dogs are very, very smart and intelligent and capable of accomplishing anything. And the female dogs are much less so. Like, they can't remember anything from one minute to the next, basically. So that aside, I did think it was a cute story, but it's very dated, so go into it being aware of that. And then the last book I read, I should say the last book I completed, it was actually, I think, the first book I started back at the beginning of the month, and that was The Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens. It was good. It was I believe it's Charles Dickens' first book, and like many of his books was serialized, so you only got little snippets in the papers, however often. And it very much felt like that. It was very episodic. It didn't feel like there was an overarching plot, really. It just felt like there were just these little tidbits of this Pickwick and his friends, and they do this, and then they do this, and then they do this. And it was very episodic. That being said, I thought it was very funny. I thought the characters were like Dickens' characters are always kind of extremes. This seemed even more so. Like, they seemed even more ridiculous than usual, and I found it very funny. I did listen to it on audio. I don't know that I would have been able to push through um, with a physical copy, but I did listen to it on audio and I enjoyed it. But yeah, it's a very good Charles Dickens work. It's not my favorite Charles Dickens by any means, but I enjoyed it. I'm glad I finally read it. And yeah, that's one huge chunker off the list for this year. In fact, 3 of the books I read were chunkers this month. That one and Keeper of the Lost Cities and The Toll were all pretty hefty books. So that being said, I'm pretty happy with 11 books because 3 of them were quite large. So those are the 11 books that I read in the month of November. I hope you had a great reading month. Let me know down below what you read this month or what was your favorite or what you're most looking forward to in the next month. And yeah, thank you for watching.